Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 19 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're going to unleash the power of your Raspberry Pi Pico W. What I will need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That would be straight up black coffee poured over ice, no sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Sunfounder. Sunfounder is actually sponsoring this most excellent series of video lessons. And in this class, we are using the Kepler kit for Raspberry Pi Pico W. Most of you guys probably already have your gear, but if you don't, take a look down in the description. There is a link over to Amazon, and you can hop over there and get yourself a kit. And believe me, your life and my life are going to be a whole lot easier if we are working on identical hardware. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's jump in and talk about what I am going to teach you today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my solution to the homework assignment that I gave you in episode number 18. But first, I must ask, how many of you guys were successful? If you got the homework done correctly, leave a comment down below. I am legend. Double chest bump. And if you were not able to do it, leave a comment down below. I folded up like a cheap Walmart lawn chair. Okay, what was the homework assignment? The homework assignment was to connect an RGB LED to the Raspberry Pi Pico W, have 3 buttons connected, and then one button turns the red channel on or off. The second button turns the green channel on or off, and the third button turns the blue channel on or off. And we're supposed to be operating in a toggle type mode. Now, I showed you in the earlier lesson, which I think was lesson number 17, how to crack that old problem of how to make a toggle switch. And so this homework assignment really should have been pretty straightforward to you, because you were just creating 3 toggle switches and controlling 3 channels of the RGB LED. So really, it was just very good practice of thinking of how to do a toggle switch, and then a good practice of building a build that was a little bit more complicated than maybe some that we had done earlier. So let's switch on over and let's talk about our build. I think maybe this would be a good view. Is that a good view? I think maybe this would be a good view here. Okay, little bit, lot going on here, but let me see if I can get this, get out of your way. I get a little disoriented about where I am sometimes as well. Okay, yeah, you can see the little arrow here. So as I point at the schematic up here, you should be able to see my cursor. And then also what I have is I have a live shot of my build. So let's look at the live shot. I've got red button, green button, blue button. I've got an RGB LED, and then I have 3 220 or 330 ohm resistors, something a couple of hundred ohm resistors. And then I've got the 3 channels of the LED connected to the Raspberry Pi Pico W, and I have the 3 buttons connected to the Raspberry Pi Pico W. You guys notice I always like to do things structured, and so I always think of RGB, red, green, blue. So when I put my buttons down, I put them red, green, blue, and then I connect them to the GPIO pins in that order: red, green, blue. And then over here, the LED, the left leg is R, the second leg, the long leg, is the ground, and then the next leg, G and B. So it's RGB, 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 and RGB. When I'm doing the coding, what order am I going to be doing the coding? RGB. So I try to do things in kind of a logical and organized fashion. But let's jump in here, and let me just say a little bit about the code here. You can see that I also, at least in the schematic, I couldn't do it on the physical build up here. I couldn't do it on the physical build, but in the schematic, to help you keep track of things, the red channel of the RGB LED is connected with a red wire, then green channel, a green wire, and blue channel with a blue wire. So let's start here. I've got the RGB LED, the left leg, when this is the long leg, when this is the long leg, And can you see what I'm pointing at? Yeah, you should be able to see what I'm pointing at. This is the long leg, okay? That long leg goes to ground. Then the left leg is the red channel through a 330 ohm resistor over to what is going to be pin 17. So the red LED pin is going to be 17, and then we do the ground, and then we get to the green leg. The green is going to come down, and it is going to go over to GPIO pin 18. Now, we skipped this third pin over because that's a ground, and so we connected the red wire to GPIO pin 17. We skipped the ground. Then the green wire, the green channel is connected to GPIO 18, and then the blue channel is connected to the next one over GPIO 18. So I've got the LED is connected to GPIO pin 17, 18, 19 in the order of red, green, blue. Again, I'm trying to keep things very ordered. Now we come up here and we've got the buttons. Well, you can see here, red button, green button, blue button. And the red button, what I have is the right leg grounded, and on all three of the buttons I've got the right leg grounded, and then over here on physical pin 3, that physical pin 3 comes up and establishes the ground rail, and so then the LED and the 3 buttons are all grounded up to that ground rail. Now let's see, the red button comes over to GPIO pin 13. GPIO pin 13, we've got GPIO pin 15, then 14, then ground, and then here is pin 13. And you can see in the physical build, I'm sort of laying this out to try to get things where the wires sort of go straight over, like I get a convenient size wire and then try to place it where they go straight over so I don't have a bunch of looping or bending of my wires. And that's kind of the strategy I use as I try to put these things together. So the red button is connected to GPIO pin 13. The red button is connected to GPIO pin 13. And then the green button comes over and it is connected to GPIO pin 8. It is connected to GPIO pin 8. And then finally, the blue button is connected to GPIO pin 3. So it's connected to GPIO pin 3. And so between my verbal description and this schematic and the actual build up here, you should be able to put this thing together. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly what I show here, okay? But it's kind of a convenient layout that I have here where I end up with the build over here being pretty, the build over here is pretty neat, at least in my mind. I think it's pretty neat. What do I mean by pretty neat? I don't have a lot of wires crossing over each other, and I don't have a lot of wires that are bending. Okay, well now we would be ready, I think, to come in and start coding this thing. And so what this is going to be is we got to think of it as 3 toggle switches and then 3 LEDs. And really, I think the battle is going to be won or lost based on carefully naming our variables. Now, I like to use the same style for naming my different variables. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have like red LED pin, green LED pin, and blue LED pin. And the capitalization is going to be consistent between those 3 variable names. Then I'm going to have the actual control objects, which are going to be my red LED, my green LED, and my blue LED. Then I'm going to have red button pin, green button pin, and blue button pin. And so I don't want to call the first one red button pin, and then the second one G butt pin, and then the third one my blue butt pin, or something like that. You see, you want to be consistent in your naming, and then it makes the coding a whole lot easier. And so let's see if you guys can kind of watch how I do this as we go through here. But let's jump right in. So I'm going to say from machine import pin, because I'm going to have to work with the GPIO pins. I'm going to need some delays in here. So from time, import sleep. Okay, now I need to set up my 3 LED pins. And so I'm going to have red lowercase LED pin, and that's going to be, I told you that that was pin 17. That's GPIO pin 17 down here, which is the second from, it's the second from the bottom corner. So it's this one right here, comes over to the red leg of the LED. So red LED pin is going to be 17, and then what? Green LED pin is going to be 18, and then I'm going to have blue LED pin is going to be 19, like that. So 17, 18, 19. Also notice what order am I going in? Red, green, blue. How do I lay it out on the board? Red, green, blue. How is the LED plugged in? Red, green, blue. How do these pins come in? Red, green, blue. So if I try to keep the physical order red, green, blue, and then the connection order red, green, blue, and then the coding order red, green, blue, I think it makes it a lot easier. Now I'm going to set up those output pins. I'm going to set up these pins down here that we just defined. And now I'm going to call it my red LED, and that's going to be equal to pin. And which pin is it? The red LED pin is going to be a what? Pin dot out. So that's going to be an output pin. Now it's going to be my blue. No, we're going to go in order. My green LED is going to be equal to pin, and that is green LED pin, and that's going to be a pin dot out. A pin dot out, like that. Okay, and now it's going to be my blue LED, and that's going to be equal to pin, and that's going to be blue LED pin, and that's going to be a pin dot out. Okay, so do you see how I try to be deliberate in my uppercase, lowercase? My is all lowercase, and then first letter of the color is uppercase, and then I uppercase LED. For some reason, I like LED to always be uppercase because it's an acronym for light emitting diode. So I'm trying to be very deliberate in the way that I define my variables. Now let's go in and do the buttons. So I'm just going to call it red but pin, but is short for button, and then that's 13, and then green but pin, and that is going to be pin 8 that I showed you, and then blue but pin is going to be equal to 3. So now I've defined those pins for the red button, the green button, and the blue button. Now I've got to create objects for those pins, and so I'm going to call it my red button, just like I had my red LED. Now I have my red button, and that's going to be pin, and then which pin? Red but pin, and that is going to be a pin dot in. And then what do we need for those buttons? We need those pull-up resistors, and so I am going to do a pin dot pull up. So I'm going to turn on that pull-up resistor and that 3.3 volts to that pin. If you don't understand, go back and watch one of the earlier lessons where I explained it. Okay, that is looking good. So now, without even thinking, my green button is going to be equal to pin, and then green but pin, and then pin dot in, and then pin dot pull up. like that. Okay, and do you see how now, because I'm consistent in the way that I'm naming my variables, I can write this line of code by looking at the line of code above it and not have to go hunt up here and try to find what I named that variable. You see, it becomes very helpful in writing the code. So now I'm going to have my blue button, and that's going to be equal to pen, and that's going to be blue but pen, and then pen dot in, and then pen dot pull up. Okay, so now I've got my LED pins defined. I have my LED objects, my channel objects defined. I've got my button pins defined, and I've got my button objects for the GPIO pins defined. And so we are just cruising through this. Okay, now we got to go back and we got to kind of think about what we are going to be doing as far as a toggle switch. There's kind of three things that I will need for a toggle switch. I need to know whether the button is being pressed right now. I need to know whether the button that button had been pressed last time. So I need to know the present state, and I need to know the old state, what it was the last time through the loop. So I need the now value and the old value, and then I need to know, is the LED presently on or is it presently off? So the LED state, and then the button state now, and the button state old. Those three things. But now I've got a red button, a green button, and a blue button. And so what I really need to have now is, instead of just like a but state now, I need a red but state now, and a blue but state now, and a green but state now, if it makes sense. And then I also need a red LED state, a green LED state, and a blue LED state. So it's a lot like what we did in that last lesson, but this time I've got to add a color to the variable name. And guys, the variables are going to get a little bit long, but they're very descriptive. So I need to know the red but state now. That means right now, is the button down, a 0, or is it up, a 1? And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just set that to 1, because when the program starts, we're just going to initialize it with the program's just starting. It hasn't been pressed yet. And then similarly, I'm going to have a green but state now, and that's going to be a 1, which is the up position, and then a blue but state now for button state now, and that is equal to 1. I could have said blue button state now, but then the variable is getting kind of ridiculously long. Okay, so red but state, green but state, blue but state, all now. Okay, and now I need to, you know what I think I can do? Now I need to do the old values, so I'm just going to grab those. I'm going to copy, and then I'm going to paste. And now, instead of the now value, this is going to be the old value. The old value and the old value. And I set them to 1 just because, like, the first time through the loop, if I use that variable like in an if statement before I've actually read it, I don't want the program to crash. Okay, I don't want the program to crash. So I'm putting values in for those 6 conditions. Now what do I need? Well, I need to know, is the LED on? So I'm going to have the red LED state. When I start out, is it on or off? It's off, so I'll say false, it's off. And then green LED state is equal to false, false, like that. And then the blue LED state is equal to false. Now you do want to kind of be careful, like really try to look and make sure that you're writing these variables down. I hope I haven't made a mistake, but you want to be kind of careful to write these variables down precisely, or you'll end up with lots of problems down later on in your code. Okay, I think I have my variables set up. I'm going to go ahead and run this just to make sure that I don't have any gross errors at this point. pin isn't defined in line 6. Speaking of gross errors, what is 6? Okay, this is uppercase pin, and then this is going to be uppercase pin. This is the method pin, and right, the method pin has an uppercase P, and I was not being careful about that. Those three, then down here, these three, it looks like I did it right on those. Okay, let's run it again. And green LED pin, another typo, green LED pin in line 7. I've got this sticky shift key that when I type in PI, I don't release the shift quickly enough, and a lot of times I end up with that uppercase I after the uppercase P. But now let's run this thing blue. Did I do it on blue also? I did it on blue as well, like that. Okay. And now let's run it again. And at least it runs now. So I could have other errors in here, but at least I got rid of some of the gross errors. All right, so let's come in, and now let's see if we can actually get like that red LED working. Okay, so I'm going to do the red one first. So what are we going to do? We're going to say while true. When is true true? True is always true. I've just made an infinite loop that will run forever or until I hit the little stop button or the world runs out of electricity, something like that. Okay, now what do I need to know? What is the state of the red button right now? Has it been pressed or not? So I need to read it. What would I read? Red but state now, and I'm going to read it from where my red button, and then I get the value. So it reads it from my red button, and then it puts it in red but state now. Why now? Because I'm reading it right now. Now at the end of the loop, I will make red but state old, red but state now. So I save it, and then the next time through the loop, it's going to be the old value. Okay, well, I'm also going to read the green button. So I'm going to say green but state now is going to be equal to my green button dot value, like that. Okay, and then blue but state now, but state now is going to be my blue button dot value. Are you guys starting to see how being deliberate about the way that you name your variables makes things really a lot easier to code? And also don't do something like give your variable names like x1, x2, x3, x4, right? Naming them what they are, naming them with descriptive variable names, I think makes things a lot easier. Okay, so you know what I think I'm going to do just for fun? Right here, I'm just going to say print, and I'm going to say red but state now, comma, green but state now, and then blue but state. Now let's just see if we kind of got at least the button hardware working right. And so I'm going to come in, I'm going to run this thing, and then we're looking over here, and I have an error. My brain invented a new color here. We have invented a new color, and that is in line 26, my green button value. Let's try it again. Okay. Okay, and it's printing out all ones because no button has been pressed. So I come over here, I press the red one, and it did not work. Okay, so what did I do wrong here? You know, one thing I might need to do, once you start reading these things, you do need to put a delay in here. So either I've hooked up to the wrong pin, or I just need a sleep of 0.1, because you can read things so quickly that it gets a little messed up. So let's put that in there, and then we come 0, giddy up. All right, watch this. Red, it goes to 0, and then green, it goes to 0, and blue is not working. Okay, so this is good that I did this because you see I can see that the blue button isn't working. And so let's see, what I need to see is, what did I say the blue button was connected to? I said that the blue button was connected to GPIO pin 3. And then I'm going to look at my little card here, and it says that GPIO pin 3, if I'm looking at this right, GPIO pin 3 should be the third one over. So it should be, let's see, no, it should be the fourth one over. The upper right corner is GPIO 0, then GPIO 1, and then ground, and then GPIO 2 and 3. I think I have a mistake here because this is saying it would be the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth one over, and I connected it to the 1. Can you see what I'm doing here? I'm counting pins 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Darn it, it says that that's right. Okay. And then I'm going to look over here, make sure that I'm connected to, okay, that looks like I'm connected to, and then I'm connected to the ground. So the blue button, I've got that, and then that blue one comes over here to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That sure looks right to me. So it could be a coding error. Those other ones are working. And that is saying that it is pin 3 is the fifth one over. And I'm looking at this again just to make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is pin 3. And then I'm setting my blue butt pin, that looks good, pin.in, that all looks good. And then let's make sure just how I'm reading it. So blue, do you see what all of this came down to? I'm reading it into the wrong variable there. Okay, but it took me about 3 or 4 minutes there, but I want you to see, and I did not make that mistake deliberately, but you can see, number one, what did we do? We tested our code early, and I'm not sitting here worrying why the LED did not come on. If we tested our code later, I wouldn't know if it was a button problem, if it was an LED problem, if it was a connection problem or a coding problem. But because we tested our code early, I can see what the problem was. And let's stop this, and let's go again. And now I've got 0, I've got 0, and I've got 0. Boom. Okay, took 2 or 3 minutes. If we waited till the code was all completely written, it would have been much harder to decode. So what do we know now? We know our buttons are connected upright and our buttons are coded correctly. Okay? So we will move on now. So I'm going to stop, and now let's continue on with our coding. So I've got the button values. Well, now how do I know whether I want to turn the red LED on or not? Well, if the red but state old, that means the last time through, what I want to do is I want it to switch when I release. And so that means the last time through it was down. So red but state old, if that was equal to 0, meaning it was down, if the last time through the loop it was down, and red but state now, now equal 1. So the last time through the button was down, and this time through the button is up, then I want my switching action to take place. So there I want red LED state to be equal to not red LED state. So If it was off, I want to turn it on. If it was on, I want to turn it off. If it was false, I want it to be true. If it was true, I want it to be false. If it was a 0, I want it to be a 1. If it was a 1, I want it to be a 0. Now, what we were actually doing is we were using true and false. And so if it was false, now it would be true. And then what I can do is I can say my red LED dot value. Now I'm going to write to that object my red LED, and I'm going to write what value to it, the red LED state, which will be true or false, which will turn it on or off. False will turn it off, true will turn it on. Does that make sense? Okay, and now after this, I think the thing that I need to do down here that's very important that I don't forget, so I'll go ahead and do it now, that I need to say the red but state old is equal to the red but state new. So you see, I'm getting that ready the next time through the loop. The present value of the button state becomes the old value. All right. This actually might be ready to... We might actually be able to run this. So let's go ahead and run this and just see if the line 30, what is it not like about line 30? Red but state old, red but state now. That's an if statement. I forgot the and. Okay, compound conditional. I need to put the and in there. So let's come up and let's run this. Red but state new is not defined. What is that nonsense in line 33? Red but state. Oh, it's not new, it's now. Okay. Now, like that. Okay. All right, so it's running. Now let's come in. And when I press down, nothing happens. But you can see that my button state went to 0. Giddy up! Look at that. Now look, when I press it and then I release it, it goes off. And right, I could do it the other way where if I change the 0 and the 1 in that if statement, if I swapped them, it would change when I pressed. But I want it to change on the release. Okay. All right, guys, that is pretty darn cool. So now I think that this remainder of the code, since I've been very consistent in my labels, I've been very consistent in my use of variables, I am going to copy this. I'm going to put a blank line, and now I'm going to paste. I got to make sure I copy the right amount. I don't need to copy all of that. I just need to copy the if statement. Okay, I'm going to copy the if statement. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to copy all of that if statement. And then I'm going to put a blank line. And then I'm going to put a blank line. And I pasted it twice. So I now just need to come in and I need to change my reds to green. And you got to make sure not to miss any of them. Green. And then this is going to be green. And then this is going to be green. I keep wanting this color breen. Somebody needs to create the color breen and show me what it looks like. Okay, now I am going to have green. And now I'm going to have green. And then green, and then green. Okay, now we will do this one for blue. So this will be blue, and this will be blue, and this will be blue, and this will be blue. Almost there, almost there. Something unusual happened there. I'm going to stop it. Thani gets a little unresponsive if you are trying to edit it as the program's running. So blue but state old, and then finally blue but state now. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that and just see what happens. I could have made some mistakes in there, but okay, it's running. And then we come down, red, boom, red off, green on, green off, and that darn blue is not working again. Okay, so I must have made a mistake here in the blue thing. Now, what do I know? I got to think, what do I know? I know the button is working, so if I hold the button down, it goes to 0. If I let it up, it goes to 1. So that is working. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to check my circuit, and this blue LED is connected there. The blue LED comes over to 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th pin over, and the 5th pin over down here on my card. On my card, the 5th pin over 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is GPIO pin 19. And did we set blue pin to GPIO 19? Yes, blue LED pin is set there. And so that is telling me that that should be working. And I'm going to just check and make sure that that resistor is connected to there. That resistor is connected to there. And that one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over. Okay, so I think I must have made a mistake in editing the code. You guys probably saw what I did. Blue but state old, blue but state now. That's good. Blue LED state is equal to not blue LED state. And then my blue LED dot value, we're going to write blue LED state. And now blued, I created a new variable. Did you guys see that? Blue but state old. Okay, so took 3 minutes, but you're seeing how I methodically check my code. Okay, so I'm going to come in here. Red, boom. Okay, green, boom. Hold your breath. Giddy up. We got it. Look at that. Okay. So guys, let's think of two very important things that you learned here. Two very important things that you learned. First of all, what you learned is that you've got to be very deliberate as these projects start getting more complicated, very deliberate in how you name your variables. And they got a little bit long, but they were very descriptive. And the method that I used for uppercase, lowercase for the green channel was the same as for the red channel, was the same for the blue channel. And so all the variables were named almost identical, except for just changing what the color was on the variable names, okay? What's the other thing that you learned? You learned that I put things in here to help me debug as I went along. And so I didn't go write the whole program. I first of all just wanted to make sure that these buttons were working. Okay, I wanted to make sure that these buttons were working. And so the ones and the zeros let me see that the buttons were working. Then when that blue LED was not working, I knew that the button part was right. And so it either had to be the blue LED was connected incorrectly, or I had an error in the code. And I knew that if it was an error in the code, it had to be right here, which in fact it was. But what I did was I just double checked the wiring to begin with. So I hope you guys saw that you want to be very deliberate in the way that you name your variables. And then the other thing that I wanted you to see is I wanted you to see how that you check your code as you go. It makes debugging a lot easier, because if we hadn't done that button debug step, when we got to the end and blue didn't work, it could have been the button was broken, the button was hooked up wrong, the button was programmed wrong, the blue LED was broken, the blue LED was hooked up wrong, the blue LED was programmed wrong. So you see, if you debug as you go, then when you have an error at the end, it is a lot easier to try to figure out what it is. Hey, what's the other interesting thing that we could do? I guess I could show you this if I put the little lampshade, my little custom lampshade here over, maybe show things a little bit better. What would be an interesting thing to do? What did I do when I showed you this thing operating? I turned red on and then I turned red off. I turned green on and I turned green off. And then I turned blue on and I turned blue off. What would be interesting for me to do right now? Red is on. What would be something interesting for me to do? What if I turn green on before I turn red off? And if I do that, look at that. I have, okay, that is almost just pure green, okay? But you see, it's sort of like yellow. Okay, now if we really wanted to mix these, we could tone that green down a little bit because the green is sort of overpowering the red, so that this that should be yellow is tending a little bit to green. So I could tone that green value down a little bit. I guess I couldn't the way I did this. I just used digital values where they were on and off, but you could redo this with PWM and then you could get it a little better. But now I'm going to turn the green off and now it's just red. Now I'm going to leave the red on and I'm going to turn blue on, and what do I get? I get magenta, or I get purple. What if I turn the red off? Then I go to pure blue. Now if I turn the green on, I go to cyan or aqua. Okay, and so you see that we can mix the colors here as well by turning on and off different combinations. All right, guys, how cool is that? How cool is that? Man, I am really having some fun. I am really having some fun with this. I can see the fisherman back there in the background. My feed from my IP camera has a little bit of aliasing in it. Right now I'm operating on battery power, and for some reason when the house is on the backup battery bank, the stream from the camera doesn't come in as well. So I don't know if my router doesn't like running on the battery or something like that, but I get a little more aliasing when I'm running on battery power. But I digress. Okay, guys, there is not going to be a homework assignment for next week, because what we can see is we've sort of reached a milestone now that using the simple components of potentiometers, switches, and LEDs, we've been able to do digital writes. We've been able to simulate analog writes using PWM. We've been able to do digital reads, which we've been doing here with the pull-up resistors. And then we've been able to do analog reads using the potentiometer. So we've got two ways to output. We've got two ways to input. And really, that is a lot of the foundational work that you need in order to use almost any component in this kit. And so now what we will be doing next week is I will be finding some neat, cool, interesting component, and we'll start playing around with it out of the kit. Because really, like, it'll just be hooking it up, and then you know how to do the two different kinds of writes. You know how to do the two different types of reads. And so a lot of the stuff that we're going to do now is just going to be really fun as we start getting in and digging into some of the more interesting components in the kits. Okay, guys, I hope you are having as much fun taking this class as I am making it. You guys, if you want to help me out, leave a comment down below, because that'll always help me with the old YouTube juice, as will a thumbs up will be a huge encouragement to me. And then if you've not subscribed to the channel already, make sure you subscribe. When you do, ring that bell so that you'll get notifications of future classes. And now, as always, share this video with other people, because the world needs more people doing engineering and fewer people sitting around watching silly cat videos. Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.